Welcome back to another edition of Arizona Wildcats Insiders Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Hutchison, and today we'll be breaking down Arizona's all-quarter century team that we put together, looking over at the last quarter century of Arizona football, talking offensive line, defensive line, specialty, everything, you name it. We are breaking it down today. Now, before we get to the defensive line portion of our segment, I want to talk about Arizona being in the middle of a bye week right now. The Wildcats are coming off of back-to-back underwhelming and disappointing losses. BYU wasn't necessarily underwhelming, but given the fact that the Wildcats were up by 10, 24-14 in the fourth quarter, it was gut-wrenching for Arizona fans watching BYU slowly climb back in that game. The game just slip away from Arizona's grasps. It goes into overtime after BYU ties it up with 19 seconds. Both teams exchange a field goal. Arizona had an opportunity to score a touchdown, but got called back with a holding call. The Wildcats then went into double overtime against the Cougars, where BYU pulled away 33-27. Couldn't convert the two-point conversion. Arizona got stopped on 4th and 5. Game over, and that was a heartbreaker for Arizona. Now, against Houston, it's kind of underwhelming. The Wildcats started 14-7 on the Cougars. It looked like they changed their road game woes. The offense started off hot. They were clicking, and then all of a sudden stalled out on a 4th and 1 where they had a chance to go up 21-7. Kendrick Reesino gets stuffed up the middle on a 4th and 1, run up the gut out of an option, read option play where the quarterback should have kept the ball. No, if he didn't keep the ball, Kendrick gets stuffed. And that was that. That was all Houston needed. It sparked them to score 21 unanswered points from that point on. They went up 28-14. Arizona battled their way back in the fourth quarter. Very impressive job tying it up at 28. But unfortunately, they left a minute left. Not a minute. 4 minutes and 51 seconds left on the clock. And the Cougars drove it the length of the field. They got in field goal range, run. Again, Houston ran for 232 yards. 232 yards. They couldn't stop them. A penalty that would have not necessarily pushed them out of field goal range, but at least would have made it a long-distance field goal was called back. The illegal motion was called back. Brennan was livid. The team was livid. And Houston hit the game-winning kick as time expired, the 41-yard field goal, sealing the Wildcats' fate. Now they have lost 2 in a row. They're sitting at 4-3. The fan base is furious. Brennan, I'm not going to say he's on the hot seat, but the pressure is on from the fan base. And I just want to say this. Take a moment, calm down, take a chill pill, take a sedative, just ease back. Last year they were 4-8. This year they're sitting at 4-3. The product on the field is much better. It's night and day. It's not even close. Offense coordinating has done a great job with Seth Dagey. He's been tremendous. Defense coordinating has been phenomenal with Danny Gonzalez. He's done a great job. I know they've given up nearly 500 yards of rushing in 2 weeks. They've been a lot better outside of the last 2 weeks. The last 2 weeks, they faced teams that are combined 13-1. Losses are going to happen, people. They're going to happen. So calm down. They're in a good position. They're going to make a bowl game. They're progressing in the right manner. Just let this bye week be a good week for Arizona to get healthy. They're banged up and fix some things defensively, scheme-wise, that they could fix heading into the next game against Colorado on the road. Now, as we look at this all-quarter century team, we have arrived to the defensive line part of the segment. This is one of my favorite units in the last quarter century. When you think about Arizona football in the last quarter century and you think about Mike Stoops and his defensive lines, that 09 defensive line alone is one of the best defensive lines in program history. I would say it's the best since the early 90s. I think it's better than some of the mid-90s and even late 90s. You're talking about studs on the edge, studs at the tackles, studs that played in the NFL. They were about 8 deep. I mean, they controlled the line of scrimmage. It was unreal. They did a great job of developing talent, finding under the radar talent, and they put it together and brought us 3 defensive linemen from that era that have made this team. Now, you look at the Rich Rodriguez era, it's slim pickings, man. It's slim. Again, Arizona was very good. They averaged 7 wins a year and had a 10-win season. Arizona was a very good program underneath Rich Rodriguez, but their defenses left a lot to be desired, and the defensive line was putrid at times. Watching them play defense was taxing at times. So nobody from the Rich Rodriguez era. The Makovic era, there might have been somebody left over from Dick Tomey that played in the 90s and early 2000s, but not enough to make a dent. And let's face it, John Makovic was one of the worst coaches, if not the worst coach in program history. The Kevin Sumlin era is where it kind of gets interesting, maybe a little bit. The teams weren't good, but there are a few good defensive linemen like Mason and others like that. And then Jed had great lines, but it wasn't just one guy. It was a unit. They were about 9 to 10 deep. They rotated guys in and out. And some of them might have made this list that they didn't transfer to Washington. I can't put you on this list when you're still playing in college football today. So they didn't make the cut for this list. So instead of other positions like linebacker and running back, where we said 2 running backs and then 4 linebackers, 2 starters, 2 backups, we're not doing backups on the defensive line. Similar to the offensive line, we're just doing starting unit, just a starting unit across the board. So let's get started with our first edge rusher of the defensive line. And I think one of the most talented in terms of what the production that he got. And to credit Mike Stoops and his staff, the development of these guys is just tremendous. Ricky Elmore from 07 to 2010, 2007 to 010, just a tremendous defensive lineman. Was a guy that was a little bit undersized, very fast, very fundamentally sound, great off the snap, second all-time in Arizona history for sacks, well behind Teddy Bruschi. I don't see anybody catching that, but just a stud on the line. Had a short segment in the NFL, made a practice squad with the Green Bay Packers, didn't last. Defensive tackle. Now we're going to the tackle spot. We're building it up like a line. This is where the Kevin Sumlin era comes into play. This guy played for Jed too. Didn't finish at Arizona, but his college career is over. He played, I think, 1 or 2 years at USC, 1 year at USC, 4 years at Arizona, and that's Keon Bars. Keon Bars was a monster, man. Very underrated, all-conference performer for Arizona and Jed Fish. Just knew how to clog the middle and was able to get to the quarterback. I thought he shouldn't have left Tucson. I thought it was a mistake going to USC, and it didn't plan out for him. It was an underwhelming performance at USC, but Keon Bars was an absolute stud. So he deserves to be on this list. My favorite D tackle, maybe ever, at Arizona. Again, I grew up in this era, so for me, it's a little bit of nostalgia. But he was an absolute monster, had a long NFL career, made a lot of money, played with the Texans, played with the Dolphins, played with the Niners, got to a couple Super Bowls. From 2006 to 2009, the former fullback turned defensive tackle stud, Earl Mitchell. Earl Mitchell was an absolute monster, all-conference performer, one of the best D tackles of his era in the Pac-10, had 6.5 sacks. Let's see, 6.5 sacks? Yeah, no, 8 sacks. I counted them short. 8 sacks in 2009. Again, that 2009 line was absolute rock solid and star-studded. Earl Mitchell, number 49, the big fella who scored a receiving touchdown against Oregon on the road in Autzen Stadium to pull off that upset, became a staple of Arizona's defense line and really the heart and soul of that defense line and the run defense. And then lastly, the local product, the Tucson product, running back turned defensive edge rusher, highly talented player, had a good career in the NFL playing for the Houston Texans and the Arizona Cardinals. Brooks Reed, 07 to 2010. Brooks Reed was an absolute stud. Him, Earl Mitchell, Earl Campbell on that line. And then you had Donald Horton. And behind them, you had 2 guys that played in the NFL as well. That line was stacked. Brooks Reed was phenomenal. The Iowa game really stands out where Arizona ended the game with 4 straight sacks to upset number 9 Iowa. Friday night in Tucson, one of the loudest games I've ever been to in my life. He racked up 17 sacks in his career, 114 tackles. Brooks Reed is the last edge rusher of this defensive line. Again, this is a star-studded defensive line. Keon Bars is very good, but he is the weak point of this defensive line. But, man, that 2009 line doesn't get the respect they deserve. And that is our defensive line of the quarter century for Arizona. Be sure to comment. Make sure you let us know if you think we missed somebody on the defensive front, on the defensive line. Again, Scooby Wright is one of our linebackers, so he's not on the line. So be sure to follow us, Arizona Wildcats on SI, at our Twitter account, at Arizona Wildcats on SI, or follow me, Troy Hutchison, at THutch1995, and we'll see you next time.